there's a lot of high-speed traffic going by here, lots of lumber and crete moving at high rate of speed.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're in the streets of San Francisco, Golden Gate Park, Waller. So we got hit up. They wanted to give this place a facelift. They wanted a flat bar, a parking block ledge, and then a parking block ledge with a little transition up to it. We had a short amount of time. The park was still open to the public, so we had to get in early and get out. And though this whole thing was approved, the email chain missed a few people. First order of business was, where do you find the flat bar? So me being in the construction game, I knew to hit up a plumbing supply warehouse. And I asked for 2 3/8 Schedule 40 tubing. Now this is typically for like industrial gas lines, but I think this is pretty common practice for skate parks. We knew that a foolproof way of getting this thing sturdy would be saw cutting the ground and concreting it in place like that. You don't want it to be too high or too crazy. We turned it into, I think, 13 inches tall. It's about 18 to 20 feet long. So that's proper. That gives you enough time to learn how to balance on a rail. You can practice your pinch, you get your slides down, all that. So I'm not really a welder, but I'm starting to learn. It's coming along in my life that I have to weld some things. So little welding tips, you always gotta grind down every area where you're gonna weld, or else that weld is not gonna stick. It's just gonna bite the outside and it ain't gonna penetrate the steel. Don't look at the weld without your shield on and just figure it out. Those are my pointers for welding. You get this thing welded to the point that you can grab those legs and fucking shake them. You could kick them. If you don't break the weld, then in my book, that passes the weld test. So as we kept saw cutting deeper, there was just no end in sight. So we had to reassess the plan. What we did then was we had to weld a flat piece of steel as wide as the hole, and then we had to drill into that steel, and then we had to drill into the asphalt and put some expansion bolts in there. And that's kind of what is gonna hold this rail in place before the concrete, 6 inches of it, goes on top of that. Waller isn't a perfectly flat surface. And we don't want this flat bar being like an escalator flat bar. Luckily for me, I have my human calculator, Frank, on hand to help me out do the calculation.
I could get a little cardio while I work.
So the final step is finishing it with your concrete, locking it in place, and really make sure that you finish your concrete flush to the existing, or else you're defeating the whole purpose of putting this thing in the ground.
Keep off the bar, kids. And stay out of the bar too, PSA.
The next obstacle is the parking block ledge with the transition up to it. It's fun to skate, it's easy to build, so they wanted one of these here at Waller. So the first step was saw cutting the ground where your transition is gonna meet the existing flat bottom. Ideally, when you're cutting out concrete or blacktop, always have your respirator on. You should always have water hooked up to your hose. You should have a vacuum. We had none of that here. So we knew we just had to get in before any humans were even around, cut this shit out, break it out, clean it up, and be done. We chose to make this thing 2 cinder blocks high with the parking block on top. That's about 2 feet. We picked a 6-foot radius transition on this, and it worked out perfect. After you saw cut, you set your cinder blocks, you dowel in your rebar, you fill the cells, you anchor your parking block on top with Sakrete anchoring epoxy. Then at that point, we set 2 side forms with our 6-foot radius transition cut to them. The beauty about cutting out that ground right there is you can just use it for fill. Beyond that, we had to call in a concrete truck. We had been requested to match the color of the ground, so we added lamp black to the mix. So we lucked out, we could back a truck in here all the way to the obstacle, and we could tailgate it. So we tailgated the whole transition to the parking block, and then we had them pull up, and we just handled the 4 squares that hold the legs of the flat bar in place. Typically, when you add a lot of color to a mix, it almost feels stickier and it doesn't seem as creamy or moist. Not to mention we're in San Francisco, the sun is blazing, the wind is blowing. All these things make finishing concrete a little trickier, so just be ready for that. Seal this thing up and finish it and get the hell out of there. Great obstacle for you guys to build. If you've never built anything, I'd say go for this as your first obstacle. And even if you build it and it sucks and you blew it, I bet you could still skate it. Last but not least, parking block ledge. We've been here before, we've done this before. So they wanted it long, they wanted it low, they wanted it in conjunction with the flat bar on the other side of the park so it wouldn't fuck up the flow.
Been laying blocks since I was 7 years old.
The designer designed some parking blocks. He said they were gonna be foolproof. We weren't sure, but he was right. So the same steps apply. Dowel your rebar into the ground, put your cinder blocks over it, fill the cells with concrete, get your Sakrete anchoring epoxy to glue down your parking block on top. We use the same epoxy to fill the joints in between the parking blocks.
Back on the horse. Get out there.
That's a wrap for Waller Facelift. 3 days, 3 new obstacles. You guys could do all this. Get out there, have fun, do it, and we'll see you next time.